The ballroom lights shimmered like diamonds as the evening began. Waiters in white gloves moved quietly between the guests, carrying trays of golden champagne and tiny plates of appetizers that looked too beautiful to eat. The place was filled with laughter, soft music, and the faint scent of perfume mixed with expensive wine. Everyone there looked polished, dressed in silk, velvet, and pride. In the middle of it all stood the billionaire, tall, confident, and with the kind of presence that made people step aside when he passed. He was known for his power and wealth, but even more for the way he carried himself, as if the world existed only to entertain him. He didn't just own companies. He owned moments. His smile could charm a crowd and his arrogance could silence one. Tonight, he was the guest of honor at a charity gala meant to raise money for an art school project. The irony was that he didn't really care about art. He cared about being seen supporting it. The guests, of course, pretended not to notice. They laughed at his jokes and agreed with every careless opinion he made. Near the corner of the hall, quietly mopping the floor before the event began, was a janitor. He was an older man, maybe in his late 40s, wearing a simple uniform and shoes that had seen better days. He moved slowly, not out of laziness, but out of calm. He had done this job for years, cleaning, setting up chairs, polishing tables, always in the background, always invisible. Most people didn't look at him twice. Some didn't even see him at all. But that night, as he worked near the grand piano, his hand paused for a second. His eyes rested on the glossy surface of the instrument. And something quiet passed through his face, like a memory trying to breathe again. When the guests started arriving, the janitor stepped back into the shadows. The piano was only decoration for most events. No one actually played it unless some performer was hired. But tonight, no one had planned any live music, just soft recorded tunes from speakers hidden in the corners. The billionaire sat at the main table surrounded by people who wanted his attention. Investors, models, politicians. They were all trying to impress him, but he was too busy entertaining himself. At one point, a young woman sitting beside him noticed the piano and said, "You know, I've always wondered what it would be like to hear someone play live at one of these events. It feels more real." The billionaire smirked. "Real?" he repeated, taking a sip of his drink. "You mean emotional? Art has nothing to do with emotion. It's all about skill, and most people don't have any." His words drew laughter from the table. The woman smiled awkwardly, not wanting to disagree. Someone else joked, maybe one of the staff could play. "I heard one of them was a musician before he started working here." The billionaire raised an eyebrow, amused. "Really? A musician turned janitor?" He chuckled coldly. "That's a tragic downgrade." A waiter, overhearing the comment, tried to explain quietly. "Actually, sir, the man who cleans near the piano, he used to play. I've heard him once during cleanup hours. He's good." The billionaire leaned back, clearly entertained by the idea. "Good, is he? Then why is he mopping floors instead of performing at a concert?" He looked around, the corners of his mouth twisting into a smug smile. "Tell you what, if that janitor can play the piano, I'll marry him myself." The table exploded with laughter. Some covered their mouths, others clapped at the ridiculousness of it. The billionaire was pleased with himself. He loved being the center of attention, even when it came from arrogance. The janitor, who had been nearby arranging chairs, heard every word. He didn't look up, didn't react. He just kept working, his face still calm, his movements steady. But inside something stirred, a mixture of hurt and distant pride. After the laughter died down, the conversation moved on to other things. Deals, luxury vacations, gossip. The billionaire forgot about the joke within minutes. But for the janitor, the sound of that laughter stayed in his mind long after the event ended. Hours later, when the guests had left and the ballroom was quiet again, the janitor returned to the piano. The lights were dim now, only a few chandeliers still glowing softly. He placed his cleaning tools aside and stood by the piano for a long moment. His reflection looked back at him from the shiny surface, tired eyes, rough hands, a faint trace of what used to be. He gently lifted the cover from the keys. His fingers hovered above them like they were touching something sacred. Then he pressed one key, just one. The sound echoed through the empty hall, pure and lonely. For a second, the years fell away. He sat down and began to play softly at first, as if testing whether he still remembered how. But soon the notes began to connect, forming melodies that came from somewhere deep inside him. Each sound carried a memory, a face, a moment, a dream that had once belonged to him. He had played for years before life tore everything apart. Once, long ago, he had performed in small cafes and halls, always hoping for a big break. Music had been his life, his language. But then tragedy struck, a car accident that took away his wife and young daughter. He stopped playing after that. He couldn't. The piano became a reminder of everything he had lost. Eventually, his savings ran out, and he took whatever work he could find. That's how he ended up here, cleaning floors in the same building where he used to perform once a month. But that night, sitting alone in the ballroom, he let the music return to him. The melody was soft and broken but full of soul. The sound of it filled the air like a secret confession. It wasn't for anyone else, it was for himself, for the part of him that had been silent for too long. He didn't know that a security guard walking by stopped outside the hall and listened. The man had heard music many times before, but never like that. It wasn't polished or showy. It was real, raw, and alive. The guard didn't interrupt. He just stood there, quietly listening until the song ended. When the janitor finally stopped, he sighed and smiled faintly to himself. It felt like breathing after years underwater. The next morning, word spread quietly among some staff. The security guard mentioned what he had heard. By the afternoon, even a few guests had heard the story, about the janitor who played like a professional pianist. Some laughed at it, others were curious. The story reached the billionaire's assistant, who told his boss as a small piece of gossip. The billionaire found it amusing. "So he really plays?" he said, almost disbelieving. "Maybe I should let him entertain us at the next event. That would be a show worth seeing." He didn't mean it kindly. He imagined it as another chance to show his superiority. But fate, as it often does, was already arranging something else. That night, as the staff prepared the ballroom for another private dinner, the billionaire arrived earlier than usual. He was walking through the hall when he saw the janitor again, this time tuning the piano quietly before covering it with its cloth. The billionaire stopped and called out to him, "You're the one who can play, aren't you?" His tone was teasing, almost mocking. The janitor straightened up slowly, not surprised. "I used to, sir," he replied simply. The billionaire smirked. "Used to? What happened? Lose your fingers?" The sarcasm hung heavy in the air. The janitor just shook his head. "No, sir. Life happened." For a moment, neither said anything. The billionaire looked at him with curiosity, as if trying to understand how someone could go from being a musician to mopping floors. Then he chuckled and said, "Tell you what. If you're as good as people say, maybe you should play for us tonight. Impress me." The janitor didn't answer right away. He looked at the piano, then back at the man who stood before him, surrounded by everything money could buy, yet missing something invisible. "I'll think about it," he said quietly and returned to his work. The billionaire shrugged and walked away. He didn't expect the janitor to actually take it seriously. To him, it was just a passing moment of amusement. But the janitor did think about it all night. He lay awake in his small apartment, the sound of piano keys echoing in his mind. He hadn't performed in years. His hands weren't as steady as before, but the music inside him was still alive. Maybe this was a chance. Not to impress anyone, but to face what he had been running from. The next day, he arrived early for work. He cleaned the ballroom as usual, polished the tables, arranged the chairs, checked the lights. When no one was watching, he touched the piano again, feeling its warmth beneath his fingers. He practiced a few simple notes, then stopped. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself. "I'll play tomorrow." Meanwhile, the billionaire was busy telling his guests about the janitor musician who might perform for them as a joke. It became the night's entertainment plan. The crowd loved the idea. How funny it would be to watch a janitor attempt to play in front of them. They expected clumsy fingers, off-key sounds, and awkward silence. None of them could imagine what was coming. That evening, the ballroom filled again with laughter and glasses clinking. The billionaire was in his element, charming his audience. When everyone had settled, he called out loudly, "Where's our musician for the night? The one who's about to earn himself a wife if he plays well enough." The guests laughed, remembering his old joke. The janitor standing near the back of the hall heard it and smiled faintly. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't nervous either. He simply walked forward, his steps quiet, his expression calm. As he reached the piano, the laughter softened. Something about his presence felt different. He sat down, took a slow breath, and placed his fingers on the keys. For a moment, the entire room waited in silence. He didn't play yet. He closed his eyes, letting the noise of the world fade. He could hear his heart beating, the faint hum of lights, the quiet breathing of people waiting to see him fail. And then he began. The first notes floated into the air like whispers. They weren't loud, but they carried something that made everyone stop talking. The sound was pure, gentle, and full of life. It felt like a story being told without words. The janitor's hands moved effortlessly, each note finding its place, creating a melody that touched even those who didn't care about music. The billionaire, sitting with a drink in his hand, froze mid-sip. His smile faded. Something about that sound reached into him, pulling memories and emotions he didn't know he had. Around the room, people listened silently, some with eyes closed, others just watching, unable to look away. The janitor played as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life, as if every loss, every pain, every night of silence had led to this one song. When the music ended, there was no applause, only stillness. For a long moment, the world held its breath. Then quietly, someone whispered, "That was beautiful." The silence after his last note was heavier than any applause could have been. The guests sat frozen, unsure of what to say or do. For the first time that evening, the billionaire didn't speak. He just stared at the man sitting at the piano, trying to understand what had just happened. The same janitor he had mocked now looked like someone else entirely. There was no uniform in that moment, no job title, no status, just a man who had poured his soul into music. The janitor stood up slowly, gave a small nod, and stepped back. He didn't bow or wait for praise. He simply turned to leave. But before he could take a full step away, a sound broke the silence, soft clapping. It started from the far corner of the hall. One person, then another and another. Soon the entire room was applauding, not out of politeness, but because they couldn't hold back. The sound grew louder until it filled the ballroom, echoing against the high ceiling. The janitor stopped for a moment, turned his head slightly and smiled. A quiet, gentle smile that said more than words ever could. Then he walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned crowd and a billionaire who couldn't find his voice. Later that night, after everyone had left, the billionaire sat alone at the bar in the same hall. The music still echoed in his mind. He couldn't understand why it had affected him so deeply. He was a man who had everything: wealth, reputation, control. But that music had reached a place inside him he didn't even know existed. It made him feel small in a way he hadn't felt since he was young. He finished his drink and looked toward the piano. The janitor's cleaning cart was still in the corner, but the man himself was gone. For the first time, the billionaire wondered what kind of story hid behind those tired eyes. The next morning, when the billionaire arrived at his office, the memory of the performance still followed him. His secretary noticed he was quieter than usual. Normally, he started his day barking orders and planning meetings. Today, he sat looking out the window, lost in thought. Finally, he asked her, "Find out more about that janitor from last night." She looked surprised. "The one who played the piano, sir?" "Yes, I want to know who he is, where he came from, everything." Within a few hours, the billionaire had his answer. The man's record was simple. Worked at the hotel for 7 years, always on time, never complained, lived alone in a small apartment nearby. No record of any trouble. No special notes except one. His previous job listed as a piano teacher at a local music center that had closed years ago. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the desk. "A piano teacher," he murmured. "So it's true." That afternoon, he went back to the hotel. The janitor was cleaning the lobby, same calm expression, same quiet movements. The billionaire walked up to him, and for a moment the staff looked on nervously. It wasn't often their boss spoke to employees directly, especially not janitors. The billionaire cleared his throat. "You played last night," he said. The janitor looked up and nodded. "Yes, sir. You were..." "Extraordinary." The billionaire's voice sounded awkward, like the words didn't quite fit in his mouth. The janitor gave a faint smile. "Thank you, sir." There was a short silence. The billionaire shifted uncomfortably. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that?" The janitor wiped his hands on his cloth and said, "Because it wouldn't have changed anything. People see what they want to see." That answer lingered in the air. The billionaire didn't have a reply. Instead, he said, "I want you to come by my office tomorrow. I have a proposal for you." The janitor hesitated but nodded. "All right, sir." The next day, he went to the billionaire's office, not knowing what to expect. The place was grand, Glass walls, expensive paintings, and a view of the entire city. The billionaire gestured for him to sit down. "I've been thinking," he began. "That performance of yours, there was something special about it. I want to sponsor you. You could perform again, maybe even record something. I have connections in the music industry. We could make this big." The janitor listened quietly, his face calm. When the billionaire finished speaking, he shook his head gently. "I appreciate it, sir, but I'm not looking for fame." The billionaire frowned. "You don't want money? Recognition?" The janitor smiled sadly. "Once, maybe, but not anymore. Music isn't about that for me now." The billionaire leaned forward. "Then what is it about?" "It's about remembering who I am," the janitor said softly. "When I play, I feel alive again. I don't need a stage for that." Those words hit the billionaire harder than he expected. For years he had chased success, numbers, headlines. Yet listening to this man, he realized something he had lost along the way: the ability to do something purely for the love of it. He tried again. "At least let me help you somehow. You've got talent that shouldn't be hidden." The janitor thought for a moment. "If you really want to help, then help the ones who don't get chances. There are kids out there who have music inside them but no way to learn. Use your money for that." "Not for me." The billionaire sat back, silent. It was the first time in years someone had spoken to him without fear or flattery. After that meeting, the janitor went back to work as usual. He didn't talk about what had happened, and he didn't change his routine. But something had shifted. The billionaire visited the hotel more often now, not for events or business, but just to listen. Sometimes he would come late at night when the hall was empty and ask the janitor to play. The two men would sit there, one with hands on the keys, the other lost in the sound. As the days passed, people at the hotel began to notice the change in their employer. He was still confident, but the arrogance was fading. He treated the staff with more respect, started asking about their lives, even remembering their names. It was small things at first, but they noticed. One evening, after listening to another quiet performance, the billionaire said, "You know, I used to play a little when I was young. My mother made me take lessons. I quit after a year. I thought it was pointless." The janitor looked at him kindly. Maybe it wasn't pointless. Maybe it just wasn't the right time. The billionaire smiled faintly. "Maybe." He paused, then asked, "Do you miss it? The life you had before all this?" The janitor took a deep breath. "Every day. But I also learned that life doesn't stop when dreams break. It just changes shape. Sometimes you don't get what you wanted, but you still get to give something back." The billionaire nodded slowly, feeling something stir inside him again. Weeks passed, and the idea that the janitor had planted grew in his mind. He started thinking seriously about funding music education for kids who couldn't afford it. The thought excited him in a way that profit and business never had. He called a few people, made arrangements, and within a month he announced a new foundation, the Melody for All program. Its goal was simple: to provide free instruments and lessons to children from poor families. The press loved it. For once, it wasn't a project to boost his image. It was something real. At the launch event, the billionaire invited the janitor to play. At first, the man refused, saying the night wasn't about him. But the billionaire insisted. "It's because of you that this exists," he said quietly. So the janitor agreed. That night, the hall was filled with guests again, rich and poor, old and young. But this time it felt different. There was warmth in the air, not pride. When the janitor sat down at the piano, he looked around and saw children in the front row, eyes wide, smiling. He smiled back. Then he began to play. The song he played wasn't complicated or grand. It was soft, filled with hope. The melody rose and fell like a gentle wave, carrying emotions too deep for words. The children listened quietly, and even the adults who were used to power and money found themselves moved. When the final note faded, there was silence again. But this time, it was peaceful. The billionaire walked up to him, eyes shining with something close to gratitude. "You've changed more than music tonight," he said so. The janitor looked at him and replied, "No, sir. You changed yourself." That night, after everyone had left, the billionaire stayed behind once more. He sat alone at the piano, pressing a few keys clumsily, smiling to himself. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was real. From that day on, things began to shift in quiet ways. The hotel staff found new respect in their boss. The janitor became a mentor in the music program, teaching children after his cleaning hours. He never asked for recognition. He never needed it. Seeing the children learn, seeing them smile when they played their first song, that was enough. And the billionaire, though still busy and powerful, found himself visiting those classes often. He'd sit in the back watching the children laugh and learn. Sometimes when no one was looking, he'd hum along to the melodies. People who once saw him as cold and distant began to notice how much he'd softened. He no longer spoke with pride about his wealth. He spoke about purpose. One afternoon, while watching the janitor teach, he said quietly, "I once thought people respected me for my money. Now I know that's not real respect. This what you do here, this is what matters," the janitor smiled. "Money builds walls or bridges. You just chose to build bridges." And for the first time in many years, the billionaire felt something he hadn't felt since he was young: peace. The months that followed changed everything around the hotel. What once was a place known only for luxury now began to carry a new kind of reputation, one built on warmth, kindness, and purpose. The music program that started as a small idea had grown quickly. Children from poor neighborhoods began to arrive every week, shy at first but eager to learn. They carried broken dreams and small hopes in their hearts, and for many of them, this was the first time anyone had ever told them they could create something beautiful. The janitor, who was now more of a teacher than a cleaner, spent his evenings guiding them. He didn't teach with strict rules or fancy techniques. Instead, he taught them how to feel the music. He told them, "You don't play notes, you play your heart." The children listened, wide-eyed, hanging on to every word. To them, he wasn't just a teacher. He was someone who saw them when no one else did. The billionaire often came to watch the classes. He would sit quietly at the back, never interrupting, just observing. He liked the sound of the children laughing, the awkward attempts at notes that slowly became melodies. He noticed how their eyes lit up when they played something right for the first time. It was simple, yet it filled the room with a kind of joy that money could never buy. Sometimes when the class ended, the billionaire and the janitor would talk. Their conversations were never about business or status. They talked about life, about choices, and about the things people lose while chasing something else. One evening, as they sat in the empty hall, the billionaire said, "You know, I built so many things in my life. Towers, companies, projects, but none of them made me feel like this place does." The janitor smiled. "That's because this isn't about what you built. It's about who you helped." The billionaire thought for a while before replying, "I used to think I needed more to be happy, more success, more attention, more everything. But now I think I just needed less noise." The janitor nodded. "Sometimes peace isn't found in what we gain. It's found in what we let go of." Those words stayed with him for a long time. As weeks passed, the billionaire began to change in ways people couldn't ignore. He became gentler with his staff, more patient with people, more present in moments that used to pass him by. He started walking to work instead of driving, greeting people he once ignored. He even began learning the piano, awkwardly pressing keys in his free time, guided by the janitor's patient lessons. At first, it was difficult. His hands were used to signing papers, not creating music. But the janitor always told him, "Don't chase perfection, chase feeling." And slowly, the billionaire began to understand what that meant. He started to play small pieces, not well, but with heart. One day, as the children practiced, one little boy struggled to play a song. He kept getting the notes wrong, frustration written all over his face. The billionaire, who was sitting nearby, walked up and knelt beside him. "I know that feeling," he said softly. "When I started, I couldn't even play one proper note." The boy looked at him surprised. "But you're rich," he said innocently, as if that explained everything. The billionaire chuckled. "Money can buy a piano, but it can't make it sing. Only you can do that." The boy smiled shyly, his small hands finding the right notes again. The sound was clumsy but beautiful in its own way. Moments like that began to fill the billionaire's days. He no longer counted profits but memories. Laughter in the music room, the sparkle in the children's eyes, the quiet satisfaction of doing something that mattered. He had spent years surrounded by people who clapped for him out of obligation. Now he was surrounded by children who smiled at him out of love. It was different. It was real, but not everyone understood the change. Some of his business partners started questioning his new focus. "You're wasting time," one of them said during a meeting. "Charity doesn't make money." The billionaire looked at him calmly and replied, "Maybe not, but it makes meaning. And meaning lasts longer than money." The room went silent. None of them argued after that. Despite his growing peace, the billionaire couldn't shake a question from his mind. Who exactly was the janitor before life brought him here? He knew bits and pieces of the man's story, but never the whole thing. The janitor never talked about his past unless it taught a lesson. One night, while they were closing up the hall, the billionaire finally asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" The janitor nodded. "Why did you stop playing all those years ago? You could have been famous." The janitor looked down at the piano for a long moment before speaking. "I had a family once. My wife loved music as much as I did. My daughter used to fall asleep beside the piano while I played. They were my world. But when I lost them, the music went silent too. I couldn't touch the piano after that. It hurt too much." The billionaire felt a lump rise in his throat. He didn't ask how he lost them. The pain in the man's voice said enough. "I started working here because I needed something to do. Something quiet. Something that didn't remind me of what I lost. I never thought I'd play again. Until that night you challenged me." The billionaire looked down, ashamed. "I'm sorry for how I treated you." The janitor smiled kindly. "Don't be. That night brought me back to life." Silence filled the room again, but it was peaceful. Two men from completely different worlds sitting side by side, connected by music and something deeper, understanding. Over the following months, the music program began to attract attention from people outside the city. Local newspapers wrote about it. A few well-known musicians visited to see what was happening. Some offered to volunteer. What had started as a small act of kindness was turning into a movement. One day, during a class, a famous pianist visited. She listened to the children play and turned to the janitor. "They play with emotion. That's rare. You've done something wonderful here." The janitor smiled humbly. They just needed someone to believe in them. Later, she told the billionaire, "You should take this project to a national level. There's real potential here." The billionaire looked at the janitor, who said quietly, "If we grow, we must never forget why we started. It's not about fame. It's about giving people a voice." The billionaire nodded. "We'll never forget." That night, the billionaire couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the janitor's words. He realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about expansion in terms of profit, but impact. He decided that the program would spread, but it would always remain free, pure, and simple, just like the music itself. A few months later, they opened their second center. The opening day was emotional. The billionaire gave a small speech, but it was the janitor's words that moved everyone. He stood before the children and said, "You don't need to be rich to create beauty. You just need to care enough to try. Music doesn't belong to the privileged. It belongs to everyone who has a story to tell." Applause filled the room. Some of the children hugged him afterward, calling him their hero. He smiled and said softly, "I'm no hero. I just listened to the music that life gave back to me." As the days turned into weeks, the billionaire began to notice something else. He no longer felt empty. The endless rush for more that once drove him had faded. He now looked forward to small things. A note played right, a child's laughter, the quiet moments after a song ended. The emptiness that money could never fill was now replaced with peace. One evening, he stayed back after everyone had left. The janitor was putting away the instruments. The billionaire sat at the piano and played a short melody. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. The janitor smiled. "You've been practicing." The billionaire laughed. "I have a good teacher." They sat together for a while, talking about how far things had come. The janitor said, "You've changed a lot." The billionaire looked thoughtful. "You made me see what really matters. I used to think life was about winning. Now I think it's about giving." The janitor nodded. "And giving always wins in the end." The billionaire turned to him. "Do you ever think of performing again? Maybe at the foundation's anniversary event?" The janitor chuckled softly. "Maybe, but this time I want the children to play. They're the real stars now." The billionaire smiled. "Then we'll let them shine." As the night grew quiet, the two men sat in silence again, the piano between them. The billionaire played a few clumsy notes, and the janitor joined in, gently correcting the rhythm. Their melodies blended, one careful, one graceful, creating something imperfect but full of life. That moment captured everything their journey had become. Two strangers turned friends, two souls finding purpose through music and kindness. Outside, the city lights glowed like distant stars. Inside the hall, the piano sang softly, carrying stories of loss, redemption, and hope. The billionaire realized that the music wasn't just in the notes. It was in the connection, the understanding, and the change it brought to hearts, and including his own. Sure, here's part 4 of your true lifestyle story. Written in a natural, emotional, human-centered tone, around 1,800 words. No headings, no violence, safe for YouTube, and deeply engaging. Months went by, and the music center had now become a place filled with laughter, dreams, and hope. What started with one piano in a quiet hall had turned into a movement that touched lives far beyond what anyone expected. The children who once played with hesitation now performed with confidence. Their small melodies carried big feelings, joy, pain, and courage, and the audience could feel it every time they played. The billionaire often stood at the back during these sessions, quietly watching, his heart full. Every sound reminded him how much had changed. His once busy, restless mind now found peace in the simplest things. He no longer cared about who had more power or wealth. What mattered now was seeing someone's life change because of something he helped create. The janitor continued to guide the children, but he was no longer just a teacher. He had become a symbol of hope. People respected him not for his skills, but for his heart. He treated everyone with warmth and humility, never letting pride take over. He always said, "Music doesn't make you better than others. It reminds you that everyone feels the same." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, the billionaire and the janitor sat outside the music hall, sipping tea. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of a bus passing by. The billionaire turned to him and said, "Do you ever think life brought us together for a reason?" The janitor smiled. "I think life always has a reason. We just don't see it right away." The billionaire nodded slowly. "When I first met you, I thought I was giving you a chance. But now I realize you were the one who gave me a chance to live differently." The janitor looked at him kindly. Maybe we both helped each other find what we were missing. They sat there for a while in silence. The air was calm and the city lights flickered like stars. Soon news of the music program spread even further. A television crew came to film a short segment about the center. Reporters wanted to interview the billionaire, but he insisted they focus on the janitor and the children. "They are the story," he said. "I'm just lucky to witness it." During the interview, the janitor spoke with his usual honesty. He said, "I'm not special. I just believe that every child deserves to feel seen, heard, and valued. Music gave me that once, and now I'm giving it back." His words touched many hearts. After the segment aired, people from across the country sent letters offering support and donations. Some even wanted to visit and volunteer. The program grew faster than anyone expected. But with growth came new challenges. More children meant more instruments, more teachers, and more responsibility. The billionaire handled the logistics, but he always made sure the soul of the program stayed pure. He often reminded his team, "We're not building a business. We're building a bridge for those who never had one." Despite all the progress, the janitor began to feel a quiet tiredness in his body. He never complained, but the long days were starting to weigh on him. Sometimes after the classes ended, he would sit alone by the piano, resting his hands on the keys without playing. The billionaire noticed and asked gently one night, "Are you all right?" The janitor smiled faintly. "Just a little tired. Age has a way of reminding us that time doesn't stop." The billionaire frowned. "Maybe you should rest more." He shook his head. "Rest can wait. There's still so much music left to share." The billionaire didn't argue, but worry crept quietly into his mind. One weekend, they planned a big concert to celebrate the anniversary of the foundation. It was going to be the biggest event yet. Children from all the centers were coming to perform. The hall was decorated beautifully with simple lights and flowers. The energy was high. Everyone was excited. Before the show started, the billionaire found the janitor sitting quietly backstage, eyes closed, hands folded on his lap. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. The janitor opened his eyes and smiled. "I've never been more ready. Tonight isn't about me or you. It's about them, the children. They're the future." When the concert began, the audience was filled with people, families, artists, and even officials. The children played one song after another, each performance better than the last. Some played violins, others guitars, and a few sang, The hall echoed with emotion. Many in the audience wiped away tears. As the final act approached, the billionaire walked on stage to speak. He looked at the crowd and said, "A year ago, this was just an idea, a small dream born in a hotel hallway. Today, it's a family, and none of this would have been possible without one man's kindness." He turned to the janitor and gestured for him to come up. The audience stood and clapped loudly as the janitor slowly walked to the piano. He smiled shyly, then sat down. "This song," he said into the microphone, "isn't written on paper. It's written in the hearts of every child who has ever dared to dream." He began to play. The melody was soft and full of feeling, a mixture of joy and sorrow, love and hope. The children joined him one by one, their instruments blending perfectly with his piano. The sound grew into something magical, something that touched every soul in that room. The billionaire stood at the side, his eyes moist. He knew he was witnessing something rare, not just music, but a moment of truth. When the final note faded, the hall was silent for a second, and then the applause began. Long, loud, and full of love. People stood up cheering and clapping. The janitor smiled and bowed his head humbly. That night, after everyone had left, the billionaire and the janitor sat together again, like they always did. "You played beautifully," the billionaire said. The janitor smiled softly. "Thank you. That was the song I used to play for my daughter. Tonight I felt like she was listening again." The billionaire didn't say anything. He just put a hand on the janitor's shoulder. Sometimes, silence said more than words ever could. In the following weeks, the music program received offers to expand internationally. People wanted to bring the same idea to other countries. The billionaire was excited but careful. "We'll grow," he told the team, "but we'll never lose the soul of what we started." The janitor supported the idea but reminded him, "Growth is good, but don't forget, music isn't about how far it travels. It's about how deeply it touches." The billionaire promised he wouldn't forget. As months went by, the janitor's health began to fade slowly. He still came to the hall, still taught the children, still smiled the same warm smile, but everyone could see he was growing weaker. The billionaire insisted on bringing doctors, but the janitor always laughed it off. "I've lived my life fully," he said, "and every note these children play keeps me alive a little longer." One evening, after a long class, he asked the billionaire to sit with him at the piano. "Play something," he said. The billionaire hesitated. "Without you?" The janitor nodded. "You've learned enough. Play from your heart." The billionaire took a deep breath and began to play one of the first pieces the janitor had taught him. The melody was uneven but honest. The janitor listened quietly, eyes closed, smiling. When the song ended, he said softly, "You see, you don't need perfection. You need truth, and you played truth tonight." The billionaire looked at him, feeling a deep ache in his chest. He knew what was coming, even though neither of them said it out loud. That night, when the janitor finally went home, the billionaire stood in the empty hall for a long time. The piano sat quietly under the dim light. He ran his fingers over the keys and whispered, "Thank you for everything." The next morning, the janitor didn't come. The children waited, thinking he might be late. The billionaire called his home and got the news that his friend had passed peacefully in his sleep. For a long moment, he couldn't move. It felt like the air had